Be okay. Let me introduce my friend Sophie Christophy, who is a self-directed mama extraordinaire. Really, it's your life, right? In a way, you have spent so much of your life so far, not only unschooling with your kids, but also developing spaces. So creating the cabin and the lodge so that there can be this collective experience of self-directed learning. You're also on the board of the Alliance for Self-Directed Education. No, the other one. As I was saying it, I was like, no, Lucy, that is not right.
Oh my God.
It's actually, what is it?
It's nothing.
What?
No, not on anything anymore. Maybe I need to catch you up, dude. Like,
okay, catch me up. Actually, can you just do your own introduction?
I'm gonna do it myself. Okay. At the moment, I'm running the cabin and the lodge.
Yeah.
And I am doing consultancy and one-to-one work with startup folk, like new settings that want to be consent-based, basically. And so that's like teams, individuals, some folk also who just want that in their life, so they're not actually like necessarily going to be facilitating in a setting, but they want a consent-based life. So yeah, so I'm doing like over the last year I've been doing more of that, this kind of more one-to-one or small group focused consultancy kind of stuff, and that alongside the settings has been my focus. And I suppose also like practice sharing, so we've done like training workshops and stuff for other people that want to develop their meeting practice or their conflict stuff or risk stuff, all the kind of hotspots. Yeah,
that's actually really amazing, because that prompts me to share what I think is one of your major contributions to the dialogue about self-directed learning and unschooling is the phrase consent-based learning or consent-based education. I use it all the time. I think it really sums up a lot about what we're actually trying to do here. It's not child-led. It's not self-motivated. Like, you can have adults offering things, and you can have adults sharing their skills, sharing their passions. You can even have teachers, but the distinction is that it is consent-based. The child is opting in to do it, and there is no sense of domination over the child's mind and body. And I think that is one of your really big significant contributions. What do you reckon? Do you feel like a legend?
I do love it. I mean, I think oh God, I mean, this is an interesting like specific thing to talk about right now, because I've had a few experiences in the last week really around my role in that practice and term even, and it is really meaningful to me. And I think like important generally for people that have decided they don't want school, like they don't want power over, but then what next? And usually there's this swing to the opposite. And I think that increasingly for me, self-direction is ethically problematic, because the idea of everyone just being like self-directed, regardless of the impact of other people, regardless of what that looks like in relationship, is like awful. Like honestly, it's like, well, oh, I just did it because I'm self-directed and that's why, and now it's okay for me to do whatever I want, and like no one's gonna have power over me. I'm just gonna like living my true life means me just being self-directed all over the place. And that like is not less harmful than patriarchy or any other kind of power like issue, right? That's my opinion anyway. And so for me, consent, like more and more, as more people like want out of the old ways, just it's like so important to be like yes, and like yes, self-direction and consent. Like self-direction without consent just is another round of bad times. Bad
times. Love it. I'm so with you. And also it prompted me to feel like for some kids, self-direction is actually really hard, especially if they've come out of an institution and into something else. And I get so many messages from people being like, my child doesn't have any motivation, they don't want to do anything. And so the feeling that a child can just instantly wake up one day after being 3 years in school and then suddenly have all these interests and be like highly motivated to get up and produce all these beautiful projects completely on their own steam is misleading, I think, and can kind of contribute maybe to the idea that if your child doesn't do that, if they're not super highly motivated, that they're a bit broken, or you're doing something really wrong, or this whole self-directed thing just can kind of lead people a bit astray, and so often I'm just gently like, you could offer some things, you could plan something and see if they want to join in and come along, it's not about just going, okay, go for it, guys. Oh, you don't want to do anything?
Yeah. And some kids are going to be naturally entrepreneurial, and they're going to be very driven, to get on with their path, and that's great. But I think it's true, like, out of humans, what proportion of humans are entrepreneurially driven, and what proportion are more following in their energy and in their way. They like look to others, and that it's kind of like the diffusion of innovation curve is helpful on that, because they like are looking for the innovators to then be like, oh, that's cool, I'll try doing that, and then it kind of flows through the group, right? But yeah, I think it's that thing again, it's like, oh, I don't want to tell you what to do, and so in order to make this pure, I'm going to take away all of my influence and create this like blank canvas and just see what happens on the blank canvas. And actually creating in a void or on a blank canvas is really difficult, or can be difficult, without any frame or invitation, or kind of like prompt, like provocation. So yeah, I think, but that's part of people's deschooling, isn't it? It's kind of like, oh God, I'm scared of my potential power and influence, I'm not going to use it to make it safer. And it takes time to move into that space of personal agency yourself, like as a parent, to then understand how to be in your power boldly and like as yourself in a way that feels authentic, and to be able to then be in relationship with other people who you are, encouraging also to be in that for themselves. But it's so messed up, isn't it, just by our wider societal experience, basically, that like that's one of the biggest griefs for me in this work, is having the vision of how things could be, walking that as much as I can in my own life, so I have a lived experience of it, and then just like looking around, being around myself and just being like, wow, like it doesn't actually, like, it's not enough, because the impact of everyone's childhoods and society and their fears and everything else just creates so many limiting factors, that then means that you kind of get this in between thing that is a bit stressful, to be honest, at times.
A little. I have a good example of that. Like for quite a few years, I was very much like, abolish the school system, let's get rid of it, and let's give people, adults, perhaps even ex-teachers, a little bit of training about how to hold consent-based space, and just let the children be free and then choose to opt into this workshop and that workshop. And I really had quite a strong sensation that that would be really, really great and fantastic for everyone. And then one school holidays, when all the kids were free and roaming around town, the message board on Facebook for our local community blew up with everyone's annoyances about all these kids and teenagers and all the trouble that they were getting up to around town because they weren't in school. And it just made me realize that until we have got supportive beliefs about children and teenagers and who they are, and our respect for them, and our sense that they are worthy of dignity, we're not actually able to set masses of children and teenagers free. It will be harmful for them because the community doesn't know how to love and respect them outside of a context of school where they're not loved and respected either. But it would, I kind of got the feeling that it could really be like a dominoes effect for these kids not feeling held and loved and respected, and actually it would be really shockingly bad move to take away the one thing they have that might be kind of at least holding them and sort of protecting them from the collective angst, the adultism that so many people in the community have towards kids, the young people, and what they should be doing, and the judgment and the feeling that they're always going to be getting up to trouble and expecting that, and then lo and behold, that is what happens. Yeah. And so I was like, man, we need some kind of there's going to be a long period of in between. That's the feeling I have now.
It's a political issue, isn't it? Because obviously if you put people like what are the options on the street? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, at least in the UK, it's so under-resourced for there to be spaces, opportunities, relationships for young people to get involved in. I mean, not just young people, right? Like people in, it's just not a political focus to try and create nurturing community. So, you know, you're kind of, again, it's like, it kind of goes both ways, doesn't it? Like when people are out, if they have time to make their own choices about what they do, well, what is the option available to them? Like, the option available to them is not great. And so then what do people do? Well, they make the best of it, but like that might not look great. It might lead to like choices. It would be like, oh, like not ideal, but it's reflective of the fact that we're so under provided for and resourced in community and in like, out and about. It's just like the civic spaces aren't designed to accommodate all those young people. That's why home educators love it in term time, because it actually feels spacious, and the rest of the time just feels overwhelmed, or like, because we're just none of the design is there. So I think you're right. It's like there has to be this hand-in-hand process of political reprioritization that respects young people as people worth including in design, and then what does that look like as it plays out in policy? We could go,
it's quite a monumental it's a monumental shift required. It's like, the internal beliefs need to shift, and then that needs to affect the spaces that we have and the resources that we make available. It's really quite gigantic work we're involved in. And that's also why I just think the only thing I can really do is what is in front of me every day, and not be like overwhelmed by the huge kind of needs and the huge kind of shifts that are required, but just show up every day, every damn day, to my own kids and our little community things that we've got going on, and just show up to those, and really believing that they are actually in some way contributing to the gigantic shifts that need to happen.
Yeah, definitely. It starts like that. That's the only space, isn't it? Really, it's like literally our own bodies, our own inner systems, thoughts and beliefs and ways of being, and then that amongst the folk in our nearest space of influence, really. But I think that the other thing about consent that is helpful alongside self-direction or team to self-direction is that it really does require a commitment to integrity. Like self-direction, it's like, I think the idea is be, and for me as well, like I value self-direction. It's so crucial. Like you tune into yourself, you're trying to connect your most authentic expression, right? And live forward from that place. But the consent thing does like put an extra demand on us to like have integrity in our actions. And the reason for that is because if you are not doing that, then you can't be in consensual relationship, because what you look like isn't what you are. Do you see what I mean? So, and consent requires an informed choice. So again, like for me, this is part of this whole shift to like, if I'm going to be self-directed and it's going to be ethical, so it's going to be consensual, like how is my integrity? Like how much of what I say and is on the outside matches the inside? Like, is that true in all places? How much shape shifting is going on? How much, you know, how honest am I being in my life and with myself? And like, again, like that for me is a very hot topic at the moment, because I kind of thought that if people make the transition out of the dominant paradigm, patriarchy is just full of manipulation and lies and like lack of transparency and lack of integrity. I assumed that people would like themselves find that integrity was part of, like, moving into integrity was part of that transition. But again, like, I'm not sure, like, if that is where people end up, you know, that like, oh yeah, like for this to work, I have to be aligned, like I need to be in my integrity. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that this is such the perfect segue into what I really wanted to talk to you about. So when I was lying in bed this morning, slowly waking up, I was remembering our first meeting together when we first got to know each other, when we were both pregnant with our second baby. So it would have been 11 years ago now, I think. And we've both been unschooling that entire time. So we have, you know, like almost a quarter of a decade of unschooling between us, which pretty much makes us like crones, I feel, unschooling crones. And it's interesting because obviously we didn't really know we were gonna do unschooling then. Well, I certainly didn't. I think that both of us, that meeting was about child rights, essentially, with Penny Brownlee. It was really monumental for me, that little gathering in Claire's lounge, meeting you. And then we kind of went our separate ways, but I feel like we have, yeah, always kind of been tapped into a source that has prompted really similar vibes. And like whenever we check in, we're like, I'm kind of thinking about that too. And we sort of end up doing really sort of adjacent thought processes and things like that. And I just find that like a really beautiful part of our friendship. And so I was very, very interested to see that you are also into magic and alchemy, you know, because this has been something that I have been really kind of orientating around over the last little season. And so, yeah, that was like the thing that really made me be like, I want to talk about magic with Sophie.
Yeah.
And, you know, how it links to all of this stuff. I feel like you've already like given a few sort of like hints in that direction. But yeah, I would love to hear about, yeah, a little bit about your inner life, maybe what your journey into, you know, doing some of this inner work. Then where it has led to, if that's cool.
Yeah. Okay, I feel like there's maybe two strands to explore. I'm going to start with like where all the magic stuff started for me, because it's like, I think it's kind of, I don't know, interesting. The reason why I started a magical practice, or like a witchy thing, was because when we were opening the cabin, I just had this sense that you can't just create a like non-patriarchal manifestation without some kind of protection. And at the time we were doing like, we had our insurance sorted, we had our policies, you know, all of that stuff was there. And I was like, it's not going to be enough. Like that kind of like everyday stuff that you just have to do, it's not enough. And I really had this strong feeling that it needed like an extra, more spiritual or magical component that was going to be like protecting the project, because of the like level of assault that happens energetically and otherwise when you try and change things from the way they are. Like the system tries to protect itself, right, by eliminating any threat. And so that led me to like see who was there anyone around me that understood about that stuff, I could get involved with. And I found some folk locally who were into it, and we started like a magical practice explicitly at the start in order to have something in place that I didn't even know what the language was to describe what I wanted. It was just like, it needs protecting in this way, somehow I have to find out how to do that. I feel like this is the right way to try and figure that out. And I totally think that that has been massively helpful to me, my work, the settings, and that all kind of like staying on track. I don't do like a lot of magic specifically on that. Like I'm not doing like big protection things or whatever, but it's just more about, I think what I've realized is it's about my own connection to that helps me then perhaps be that protection to the project. So that's probably the way that it's working out. So there's that thing, and then on the other side, what's come along with that is my realization that how anchoring a magical practice can be when you are a change maker and your external world is very disorienting because your lived experience is not reflected back to you at all. So like for me, my magical practice, which is super regular, I have like, I'm like in a small circle with one other person at the moment. We meet every week. We also do like weekend immersive things or one day immersive things where we give it more time. And I've been doing that now for about 3 years, has been totally life-saving for me in navigating personal changes, you know, relational things, my creativity, figuring out what to do, dealing with blocks, dealing with confusion, I think is like where magic really comes in, because if you're feeling confused and you can't quite see like what is going on, then a magical process, I use divination, so like cards, tarot cards, oracle cards, and then also just intuited like tuning in. It just helps to reveal blind spot and reveal like other aspects of what might be going on that you wouldn't get to like with your thinking mind, basically, but you can maybe feel it in your body, but you can't identify like what is going on. So yeah, like it's, I mean, mega and definitely a massive part now of what I consider to be my lifestyle or my way of living, you know. And I do it every day, like generally speaking, unless I'm really knackered and haven't like really got into like on the brink of a burnout kind of like place, or I normally will do like, I have watercolor practice as part of my sort of spiritual magic practice. I will pull cards every day, like one card for the day, and I have like keep like an altar kind of in my office, and that is my simple practice that I do pretty much every day.
Thank you so much for sharing. I absolutely love that you came to it just not really knowing, but just having an instinct. And you know, our intuition is so trustworthy in that sense. You know, you can have this feeling, oh, I need to find something out about this, you know. And I think about that a lot when we're trying to do big change making things, and you know, you don't really know how to go about things, and or just life in general feels overwhelming. If I'm ever feeling like oh, there's going to be so many massive important decisions to make, I just remind myself that my intuition has never failed me before. Like some kind of nudge is going to occur that's going to send me in exactly the right direction. So yeah, I really love that it was that you followed up, and that you didn't know where to begin, and you were like, cool, I'm going to find some people who know. And that just feels really important, because so many people will want to do something but be afraid to admit that they know jack about it, you know. And that's very that's a school wound, to not be able to act on something you really want or wish for because you're afraid to look as though you don't know what you're doing. We're so afraid to be absolute learners and absolute beginners. But that is the place that everything can begin. And you know, now 3 years later, you have this like real solid personal practice and group practice that is like life-changing. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. I too do a daily card, and with a new deck that I've got. I've been using oracle cards for quite a few years. I've been very into reclaiming the word witch, you know, for many years now, probably like 7 years since, you know, moving onto land and really connecting with the earth, feeling really able to reclaim that word from the kind of Christian upbringing that I was raised with. Starhawk's books helped me do that. Had a lot of sort of green witchy vibe going on for many, many years, and felt that didn't feel too freaky to me. And oracle cards, they didn't feel too freaky to me. They're just sort of like sources of inspiration. And so felt quite at home in that practice for like quite a few years. But then over this last year, being very much more drawn towards like traditional witchcraft, and got my first tarot deck, and that felt really intense for me. That felt like a really distinct step on, and like examples when I was a kid in church, apparently the local occult group would regularly wrap our church in tape, like cassette tape that they'd like chanted on and stuff. So like we'd arrive at church and the whole church would be wrapped in like cassette tape. And so like that is what I'm like dealing with when I'm like now sort of dabbling in sort of occultic practice, is like this sensation that this is really bad. But now I'm like, what the ever-loving hell was that about? Like, who was wrapping the church? Like, surely not the local witches. I mean, I actually really can't explain that. But yeah, it's felt very it's been really interesting over this last year, that feeling of just being absolutely led towards something, even though my brain is like, this is scary, but still going, I'm gonna keep trusting my intuition on this. And just keep having the most amazing little miraculous magical things occurring, like pulling the same card out of a 77 deck. What the heck? You can pull that for days in a row. Someone explain that to me. Like, what the hell? Things like that that are just so confirming that this really is very inexplicable. But there's something really essentially true about this, and having to just stand down the part of your brain that is like, this is so whack, and just really trusting the heart's knowing and trusting the mystical part of life. So tell me more about your magical things that have happened to you. Do you have any like really good examples of inexplicable magic unfolding as a result of your practice?
I've had the same as you in terms of the kind of repeating patterns of cards, or the same card like over and over again, day after day. And like you said, when that happens, you're just kind of like, wow, like this is really an interesting experience and process. I think that the thing that it helps me with as well is to make sense of my own experience of magic that is more spontaneous and outside of like a defined magical place, because you can create like a container to do this stuff in, but it's like life, it's all around. I guess this is like the integrity thing as well, right? Because when you were saying that thing about wrapping the tape around, I was like, wow, like that really doesn't feel like something that would be like congruent in how I understand this, like that, and then that makes me always want to ask the question, which I think is so helpful in the work we do anyway, which is like, why is that happening? What is the underlying reason? What is the underlying belief behind it? Do I agree with that or not? Like, how does that feel? And anyway, I think I have quite a lot of experiences that are not very typical, I don't think, like I'll have like really intense reactions to things on an energetic level that don't really make sense in terms of what's going on. I'm quite intuitive to like things that are out of alignment, or like in my work, I'm looking for where there isn't consensuality, when I'm helping other folk, and I think just through doing that work over time, I've become more sensitized to it. So now I tend to pick it up really spontaneously, and that's hard to explain and articulate, but I now understand it kind of more through a spiritual and magical lens. I think my belief is that like whatever you want to call God, or like divine energy or source or whatever you call it. I don't really have a word for it. It's more just like is. Wants alignment. It wants integrity and alignment. And so for me, when I notice that is out of whack, it is quite a like spiritual experience, because I feel like it's really coming from that place. It's not really about me. And I've had this experience in my work pretty much from the beginning, of feeling like a conduit rather than the source of like what is going on in my change making work. And like it very like all the stuff around consent-based ed came as like a download over a very weird period of time, accompanied by my own curiosity and research, but that was to try and make sense in a way. These things came hand in hand. And I think that if I wasn't doing a magical practice, it would be very easy for me to become very confused in my work, because a lot of the decisions that I make in relationships and in business like don't really make sense. Like they're not good business decisions, or they're not like normal relational decisions. They are like in conflict with that, or they are controversial, you know, to what people think is reasonable or whatever. And I feel it on such a visceral level in my body that it's almost impossible, or is impossible, for me to not do that. It's very, very compelled, and it's not coming from a mental place. It's coming from a very energetic experience. And I feel like, yeah, I don't know, I'm at a point of just being, if you resist that, or you over question it and analyze it, where do you end up? Like you're gonna, like, I don't even know how to manage my own experience in some ways, other than to make sense of it as something spiritually informed. And if I do that, then it enables me to get on with it and to not be freaked out or fearful about the future or what is happening for me or what is going to happen next, even though I do often feel scared about those things. On some levels, like this feeling is stronger and it's deeper and it's more real feeling, which is super weird, right? Like, why does that magical, real spiritual feeling that doesn't fit anything around me feel more real than all of the material reality that is like laid out? But it does. So yeah, so I suppose like that for me is where I'm like, oh, I just have to like somehow surrender to this as my lived experience this time around on the planet. And my magical practice helps me to have a context for what is invisible and what is like hard to articulate, hard to explain to other people. It's a space of belonging and understanding that I can access to help me stay aligned and have integrity and be on course when everything else around me would be like, no. Yeah. So, you know, it's like, if you're going to de-school, I'm sure you've probably done like a workshop, I know, over like, you know, de-schooling spirituality, de-schooling these things. Like, what is that? Even you could, you know, do one on de-schooling witch. Do you know what I mean? It's like what you were saying, it's so important, isn't it? I think it's the same with like gay stuff and queer stuff, or anything that has been like held up as like, oh no, it's so bad, just like, you know, God, it's just so tedious, isn't it, to still even be in that conversation around these things. But that, you know, it's like the legacy and the continued reality around it causes us to have to like reconcile it. But if you're kind of like, I'm queer, I'm in a gay relationship, I'm like spiritual person doing work that makes no sense in the current time space, like, how do I stay sane in that experience if I don't have some kind of anchor that helps me make sense of why I feel the way that I do and do what I do? Yeah. And that is what magical practice offers me. That is what my spiritual connection offers me, is that sense of, no, dude, you are on the right track. Like, you need to continue taking one step in front of the other, because this is your life purpose. You're on the right track. Like, stick with it and forget the rest. Like, you just have to stick with it, you know?
Yes, mate. Oh my God. Just like, go.
Oh God, like, it's so brutal. It's so brutal.
It's true. Like, you know, how do you carry on doing what your heart is telling you to do in this absolutely messed up society if you don't have some kind of relationship to source, or something greater than yourself, something that is reassuring you, but also giving you mechanisms to shift what, you know, those the energies and the tensions that come up all of the time. That, like, I just had a very magical experience over the last month that feels very emotional to speak about, because it's been really hard out. About a month ago, I started having very physical symptoms in my heart, and I even went to the doctor because they were like slightly worrying, and I just wanted to not really worry about it. And I was having ectopic beats, where your heart just skips a beat. But with it came also just like a really tense feeling. And I'm a very self-aware person, Sophie. Like, I journal every damn day. I'm surrounded by witchy, self-aware, conscious people, conversations with Tim, my partner, every day, you know, very, very incisive about what's going on. And this, I just couldn't explain. Had no explanation for it. I had a little bit of a sense that maybe it was related to feeling a bit overexposed. I'd had a massive amount of growth on Instagram last month. A reel got like nearly 6 million views and just loads of new followers. And I kind of felt like maybe it was just like my brain and heart were like, that's cool, that's not a problem. You know, I was mentally fine with it. My heart was like, oh yay, more people are going to learn about unschooling. That's really cool. But it was as if my nervous system was just like, what are you doing? Like, this is not normal. I had a sensation it might have been that, but I didn't really know, because it didn't make sense. It was just not aligned. And I was like journaling the fuck out of it, chatting with people, praying about it, and yeah, couldn't figure it out. And then I was like, Lucy, you really need to call on all of the tools that you have. So I had a friend do a tarot reading for me. That was on the Monday. I had the tarot reading, and immediately something just shifted in me. I was like, oh yeah, I can feel like the whole tension in my chest and my heart skipping beats just ease a little bit. And then on the Tuesday, a healing friend randomly gave me a hug and then was like, whoa, what is this? And like tapped into some energy around the back of my chest and just sort of like did some energy release around it. And then driving home, I was like, oh yeah, I can immediately feel that has also eased it. So that was on a Tuesday. And then on a Wednesday, I had a one-to-one with a kind of witchy coachy type person, which was the wackest session I've ever had in my life. We ended up praying to Jesus. It was so wild. We were both just like, what the hell? But it was so potent and magic. And it's that surrender, you know, like my brain is like, where's Jesus popping out from? But you know, my heart was like, just surrender, like try not to rationalize your way out of this. And it ended up being very, very magical. So that was the Wednesday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. By Wednesday lunchtime, no more ectopic heartbeats, no more tension, completely free of any strange physical feeling. So it was like really physical as well as being generally tense, completely gone. And I can't even say, oh, it was this belief changed or this feeling. I can't even nail down what happened, but just it was the difference between night and day from Sunday to Wednesday. And all I can say is it's just magic.
I had a I mean, I totally like appreciate that, you know, what you've shared about your experience and the physicality of it as well. It is so often shows up in the body, doesn't it? Like this weird stuff, and then like you can't get to the bottom of it. It's like, do I need to sleep more? Do I need to drink more? What's the supplement? Like, and when it's energetic or it's on this other level, like you can't really get to it like without something a bit different, you know. But I had a weird experience earlier this year that's you've reminded me of. It's like, I don't know, Yeah, so basically my dad died a few months ago, and my dad had been living on the other side of the world, and we haven't been in contact for 10 years. And so I didn't know that what was happening, basically. But I did know before my dad died, because another family member contacted me and let me know, and it was a whole thing. But part of the reason I'm sharing it is because in my not knowing, I had gone to bed. Basically, like a few days before it happened, I just was like, I have to go to bed. Like, it was completely weird. It's like in the afternoon on a Friday, I was just like, I cannot do, I'm like, need to put myself into bed. And I didn't get out of bed until the Monday. And this corresponded, I think, with the period that led into my dad dying. And then when my dad died, then I had a shift on that. But then after that, had this like super intense pain, like fibromyalgia. I don't even know what the hell it was, but it was disabling level of pain in part of my body, like on my right hip and like around my back and on my lower pelvis on the right hand side. And like I said, it was totally disabling, and it took like time for that to resolve. And I'm sure that it was connected to the energetic process around all of the stored trauma from the relationship with my dad, wider family relationships and so on, that was then somehow released or catalyzed by my dad dying, and then was just expressed in my body. And then after that, the thing that's been super interesting, and like, you know, is this still magical? I guess so. It's like, is magic the things we can't see? You know, it's like the experience that is beyond our human sight. You can't necessarily explain through like science and stuff. But since my dad died, I've had the like multiple experiences now of feeling very partnered by my dad in a way that like was not possible in life. And that like I feel closer to my dad now than I have done for years and years and years, and in a more equilibrious relationship with my dad, and a much more loving relationship with my dad. So like, what the hell is that about? You know, like I was driving along the other day and something happened, like a sort of signy synchronicity thing, and I literally just like felt so in my dad's presence and like just cried in the car for a bit, but not because I was sad, more just because of the sort of sense of and because it's not like I'm not in an active grief about my dad, you know, because our relationship I'd already grieved it 10 years ago, like it's already was over. So these thoughts and experiences aren't coming from a longing. It's not coming from like, I miss this person and I'm desperate to connect with them. Like that's not what it's about. But which again, it's a bit like when you get cards in a row, you know, it's kind of like the fact that it's playing out in this way when I have no conscious desire to be in this situation. I'm not going to mediums being like, hook me up with my dad, like not at all. I was ready to be like, well, that's the second end of an era of this whole situation, and like just to release it like a Viking burial, like off into the sea. You know, I did like a grief circle about it. I was like, I've processed, I'm done. And yet there's now this presence, like where I'm like, oh, like super interesting that our relationship has just become like way more real now you're dead. Like what the hell? I you know, and then again, like you can't explain it, but I think being open-minded and open to magicalness, which is a result of like trusting in these things, means that now I'm like, oh, well, if now we're in a relationship, this could actually be really great, because my work is starting to move into this very similar space that my dad's work was in. And my dad is an organizational psychologist, was a consultant from when I was born, really, was really successful in the work that they did. They like did a lot of systems changing, well, you know, like just basically working as a consultant on organizational stuff. And frankly, that is also what I'm doing in my own way. It's like culture change, transformation, organization, systems is super similar. And just at the point where it kind of comes closest to my dad's previous work, which I didn't really understand when I was in relationship with my dad, because they didn't share that much with me about it, and I was young, you know, so I can't draw on the sharing that happened in life, but somehow I feel that at this point it's probably going to help me, which is so strange. But you know, I don't know, Lucy, I mean, where are we? But you know, when you walk out of the system, you don't realize, oh yeah, and also actually like part of what is numbed out and erased through school-based and traditional parenting culture, that, you know, the whole colonizer way of like raising kids, is also our access to these parts of ourselves. Like spiritual self is a thing. And in the settings we include it. So like when we talk about consent and we talk about self-direction, we have these 5 areas, which is intellectual, bodily, emotional, spiritual, and creative. And we honor like all of that as being part of the human experience. But like out of all of that, only one is included within traditional schooling, which is intellectual, and that's not even included in a intellectual way, right? Like, but the mind, it's like, oh, it's the thinking mind, it's the mind that matters, and like the repetition or the remembering and the regurgitation of like learning, like in this very like back and forward like way, you know. But that's just like such a fraction of human potential, right? I feel like I'm just, you know, everyone's different, and that's cool with the magic thing. You know, like how I do it and my experience is not going to be the same as yours. It's not going to be the same as anyone else's. It's like unique to me and to you and everyone else. And I'll just share one more story of where it's been funny, which was so when I tune in and do a magic like space for another person or for myself, I'll like close my eyes and then I just speak out, like it's almost like a guided meditation to where we're going to do the magic in the magical space. So it'll be like, oh, and now we're walking, like I literally say what comes to my mind. It's not pre-planned. So like, oh, we're walking down this path and we're now in a woodland, and it's whatever it is. And that's how I set it up. And it's always like super funny, like what comes up, because it's kind of like pulling a card, but like in your imagination. And I never normally have like people show up into that. It's my connection with source or whatever is very direct. It's just me and that. It's not like there's no angels, there's no archetypes, it's just this line. But I was doing for someone else, and when I tuned in I was like, oh, who's this? And it was theirs. So like it was not my thing. I was like, this is super weird. I would never normally tune in this way. I don't even like get this relationship that has these people in it, but like they're here for you, so here we go.
Yeah, whoa, that's full-blown psychic territory, Sophie. I feel like, you know, within a few months you might be offering like psychic readings to unschoolers across the world. I love hearing you talk about this because you're so damn sensible, and I feel like people listening to me talking about spirituality, they'll be like, man, she's such a flake. Obviously, she does all this witchy stuff. Obviously, la la la. Whereas you are like so convincing because you're just like, yeah, you know, it's just a fact. I love it. And I really feel like people are gonna, maybe people who haven't considered this side of things might be really interested, because, you know, you really do embody the alchemy of being very, very real and, you know, attuned to the facts and the real oppressive structures that we're living under, and, you know, not shying away from reality, but also being totally open-minded and with your antenna up towards, you know, divine. And so I love how you embody all of that. A couple of things. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those stories. They were really powerful. And I just wanted to pick up on one or two things that you said before. You know, we've been chatting for we've been chatting for this has gone so fast. Oh my goodness. Okay, just quickly though, because it's very related to unschooling. One of the things that has been occurring for me over this last year has been really releasing the need to be good. You know, I was raised in the church, I mentioned that, and so very much spent probably the first 3 decades of my life believing that the main aim of my life was to be a good person. But actually, when you're trying to be integrated, which is the work of magic, that's the work of alchemy, is becoming whole and integrating all of the parts of you. That's really the great work. That's what we're doing with this. If you're on that path, you can't guarantee you're going to look like a good person all of the time. And that sprang to mind when you went to bed for 3 days, because you might have actually had obligations on those 3 days. You might have let people down. You might have disappointed people. You might have had to be shockingly unpresent for needs that were expected of you to fulfill. But you were like, actually, I have no choice here because this part of my life is so important. I have got to go to bed and honor this greater need of alchemy within me, you know, and so that's just been a really massive shift for me over this last year. It has been releasing that need. And with a lot of the mothers that I work with, this just comes up time and time again, that they're just trying to fulfill so many roles, that there are so many like morals involved in what they're doing. And it makes me feel like maybe part of the reason witches were so resented and punished was because they were working on integration and being whole rather than looking good and neat and even kind or fulfilling all of the roles that were expected of them. They were the ones in the village who were like, I actually can't do that, or I can't comply with that, and they were just absolutely committed to, being the most them, the most integrated them. And it just makes me think of unschooling, because to me, that is really what I'm trying to hold for my children, is the space that for them to be integrated, and I can notice over the last decade, the greatest sources of pain for me have been where I have felt that my children are not going to be good citizens, whereas now I've let that go. Now I'm like, they might need to not be good in order to fulfill alchemy, the alchemy requirements for themselves. Does that make sense? I've finally released like this source of pain in my unschooling life, which is like, I want them to be themselves. That's the great work of unschooling. But also, can you be like a good citizen, please? And now I'm like, just be whole.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, and maybe, I don't know, like, I'm not sure what I think and feel about this, as in, like, a lot of there's a whole history around the witchy stuff. My experience of that is that quite a lot of the accusations were a product of like neighborhood hatefulness towards each other. You blame this person, someone accuses, it becomes like a scapegoaty thing. I'm not sure that it was a response to integrated ways of being. I think that like it's really was like very misogynistic in the terms of kind of like, oh no, that person did the thing, like a way to resolve gossip. And oftentimes, like, if someone was accused of being a witch, for them to be killed, they needed like 100 people from the town to agree they were a witch. So
but that happens all the time today as well.
Exactly, but like,
you need to get 100 people to agree that you're an idiot.
Yeah. But I'm cautious around saying that accused witches were somehow only the healers, only the integrated, only these people that were persecuted, because I'm not sure that is true to the history. Although I understand why it's a story that helps us understand our experience now to a certain extent. So yeah, I think also about the good thing, like, it depends on your definitions and understandings of these words, doesn't it? Because if what is it that you think is good? I mean, for me, like, a moral and ethic way of being is really important, and it feels aligned for me. It feels like, for me, alignment with this spiritual aspect is like, it's love, it's a loving energy, and therefore, like, that also leads me in what feels authentic for me to do. But I would say that, like, and Martha Beck's quite interesting on this, the difference between being nice and being kind, being like, oh, you might think it's loving to withhold information from someone because if you told them it would hurt their feelings. Or I would be like, that is not loving at all. Like that is not ethical or loving at all. The ethical and loving thing to do is to trust that they can handle the truth and to share with them information so they can make informed choices, so they can live in reality, right? But to another person, that might be perceived as being mean, you know. And so I think this notion of what it means to be good is like subjective to your beliefs and to your context. But I think, and maybe it is part of shaking stuff off as a process, right? It's like if you feel like you've been influenced by a notion of morality that has led you out of your own authentic expression, or like to feel shit about stuff, then perhaps you need a rebellious stage to then break that all off, like blah, 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 I'm not even going to care about it, because you have to shake it off before you can then reach this like middle point again of like, oh, I've got that out of my system now, like what's left, and then walking again like from that place, if you see what I mean. Like maybe you can't go from like I'm being morally good to the middle. You have to do this swing thing again, like go
I
to the
think
other
that's
side.
the like trusting a process, and
Right, like you need a
trusting your
process.
intuition. So like a little example, you know, a few years ago I just stopped having the ability to cook dinner. You know, I was like, nah, I can't cook dinner anymore. I refuse. And I was like, what the hell? Like good mums cook healthy dinners at nighttime for their children. But I was like, I can't do it. I really can't do it. And I was like, okay, you're just gonna have to trust the process. Something's going on. And so we just kind of ate kind of rubbish for a few months. You know, I was just buying like one packet dinners and stuff like that. I was like, woo, telling all my friends about it. Like, hey, there's this awesome like one packet curry in the supermarket. And they were like, what is Lucy doing? But you know, sure enough, within 3 months I'd got it out of the system, and then but I'd healed a part of me there that needed to lay down this good mum element, and then I was absolutely free to then come back and pick it up and, you know, cook great fabulous dinners. But carry on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just saying I agree. Like, as in, I think that if, where there's a need to kind of like, oh God, I'm having this feeling, I'm going to do the opposite in order to kind of find some space, and then I'm going to find my way back to like what feels more like balanced in the middle. Like, I kind of feel like that is maybe what happens. The other thing as well about going to bed, like, I was really lucky that I knew that my partner was going to be able to manage that, or like as in our family context, it didn't create a problem. Oh, I just have to shut my window. But had that not been the case, then I wouldn't have done it, dude. Like, I don't believe that it's okay to just be like, fuck it. Like, I'm in a process. I'm going to abandon everything. Like, you guys can all deal with the fallout and like take myself off. Like, I wouldn't have done that. I would have like figured out a way that I could like be with what was going on for me and still not like just expect my family to kind of like exist in the wake of my own life, right? Like, but I didn't have to, because I was more supported at the time. There was just more people around, you know. So like, I think, like, again, it's like, I don't want to be just doing me and not taking responsibility for the impact of my behavior on other people. That doesn't mean I'm gonna like be inauthentic. It just means that it's a dance, isn't it? Like, this is what I need and what I want. This is how, to what extent do I need it now? To what extent can I negotiate? Like, you know, because otherwise, like, it's like we can't in a family live a fully independent life because we had kids, we have a family. And like, a lot of people, I think, long for that. They long for the freedom of full independence, to be able to just be themselves and just not, you know, we can always be ourselves, but do you know what I mean? Have more agency and autonomy to just fulfill like what we want to do. But that is the experience of someone without a family. Like, you know, and maybe at different times in life, like, that is more and less accessible to us. But I don't know. I think I don't know. It's, you know, but it's, again, it's like, it depends on the thing, right? Like, I left a marriage, I ended a marriage because that was a boundary point and a thing that had to happen, and it has had like massive impact on me and my family. Obviously, that level of change, I didn't not do it because I wanted to be a good wife.
Yeah.
But it's like that's an extreme situation whereby sometimes you have to do the thing that you need to do. A lot of the time you can negotiate ways to do it with that are more like balanced or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say,
I do
Lucy?
hear what you're saying. I'm really loving this challenge. Yeah, I'm really loving just the nuance of the conversation here, like how circumstantial those things are. What comes to mind is the feeling that the vibe with unschooling that I've always tried to live with is to work with the idea that our needs are not mutually exclusive to begin with. That's the default position. How, there's a lot of needs here in the room. There's a lot of needs in the family. Let's begin with the vibe that we can all get our needs met. Let's figure out a way to do that, so yeah, that's like a really important thing. And then also just trusting when you absolutely can't do the thing, and I guess that's, that maybe wasn't your example with going to bed for 3 days, but was an example with your marriage. Really trusting that there will be points in a woman's life where they feel this feeling of, I cannot do it. And actually the fallout might be really dramatic. It really might be. And you have to surrender to it. Because actually, I personally believe that, I feel like I don't even have to say, I personally believe, I don't have to put a caveat in there when I'm talking with you, but I think it will make itself known in the body, and you'll have to stop doing it eventually, but it will be out of your hands. So, I do really think that, the default is, okay, let's figure out. And, I have to do that every time I bleed, because for a couple of days, I really, really stop. I actually do call people up and say, I'm not going to be able to do this because I'm bleeding early and I'm stopping everything. So that's a practice for me. That's actually a spiritual practice, to down my tools completely where possible. But we also, do that dance every month, how can we fulfill this in our family? Like, how can we make sure the needs are being met? But then also trusting when it's like a hard no. The great work requires this of me, and it doesn't make sense, but I have to trust this process, and maybe it will only be revealed in a few years' time why such a dramatic, unnice thing was needed of me here.
Totally. And I think, like, again, like along with the spiritual thing, like grieving and being aware of grief, like as a thing, is so important in this, because it's like a lot of the things that cause us to like need to not do, or need to like, have a boundary or something, are a result of like living, and this kind of takes us back full circle to where we started. It's like the world ain't good enough for humans to live healthily. Like, we've set it up in such a messed up way. And so, for example, like, you hitting a place like of not wanting to do dinner anymore, like, to me is like an expression of grief, possibly around the demand on you and like the difficulty of nuclear family life, right? It's like, you wouldn't necessarily have to do that if we had a better design around family life that was meant that you only cooked it once a week or whatever, but it's the relentlessness that is a product of like this stuff we're trying to change, on a systemic level. And it's like, in that situation, like, you found a way to manage that for yourself, but underneath it is pain, isn't it? I think underneath it is the pain of being in that situation, there literally not being a good way around it, and like, this is the best I can do for now, guys, like, fuck it, but like, so I think I'm really like, feel as though if we know like, oh, right now, like, the reason I'm doing this, it's not because it's who I am, it's not because this is a better, more authentic expression of me or more aligned for me. This is me dealing with the grief of the fact that I'm so freaking living in this situation, and I can't even do what I would want to do right now. I can't have that experience right now because of that. I've done as much as I can. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've hit the limit of creating the life that is going to be better than the alternative. And now I'm at that edge, and all I have is the grief around the gap. you know, and like grief is super interesting, like the phases, and you know, I'm angry right now, oh, it's because I'm in pain, it's grief thing. Oh, why am I feeling down? Oh, it's pain, it's a grief thing. You know, you can kind of like, oh, what have I, grief shows up with any loss, anything. It's not just someone dying, it's like any change can trigger grief, any loss, any disappointment, any realization of what you thought was isn't, like all of that can trigger a grief experience, you know, that then affects our behavior, it affects like what we can and can't do. And but it's not like who we are necessarily, it's more like that, you know, the expression of the feeling.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I feel like if there's any area that we're trying to get some clarity on, a grief process is pretty much like the first place to begin. You know, you can only really get the clarity when you're sort of making room for that grief, and, you know, possibly ideally getting on the other side of it so you can see a little bit more, you know, what the options are. Yeah. This has been so beautiful. There's so many more areas that I really am desperate to follow up with you. We haven't even spoken about dreams or nothing.